So to talk about Barcelona's Frenkie de Jong and Manchester United's interest, I'm joined by the Athletics' Andy Mitten, Anka and Pol Ballus. Just take us back to United's interest, why they had it, Andy, and why they maybe still have it.
Erik ten Hag identified Frenkie de Jong as a key player who he wanted to bring to Manchester United in the summer of 2022. That came about through meetings in Amsterdam with John Murta, talking about potential Manchester United targets. That was still while Erik ten Hag was manager of Ajax, and he was the number one target for Erik ten Hag. He identified it as a key position and as Frenkie de Jong as the key player who A, he felt could improve Manchester United, and B, felt would come to Manchester United, partly because he felt he would come individually, but also because Barcelona's financial situation meant that they actually had few players who they could get serious money for. So if they sold someone like Gavi or Pedri, one of their really talented attacking midfielders, that wouldn't have been acceptable to fans. Frenkie de Jong, the fans were not completely won over by him in the middle of 2022, and that led to Manchester United putting a bid in, negotiating with Barca. Richard Arnold and John Murta spending serious amounts of time in Barcelona last summer. People don't realise how much time they spent in the city last summer. Only little bits of it were picked up by the media. And it went on and on and on. It was well publicised in the media, but in the end, he decided he wanted to stay in Barcelona.
He wanted to stay. Yeah, I mean, you're at the Barcelona training ground now. Have Barcelona's feelings and points of view changed since the summer to now?
Yes, they have, because he's had a very good season. So people knew he was really talented, and I spoke to a lot of people around Barcelona last summer, and there was a mixture of people saying it's a great shame they've not used him properly. There were other people saying he's not the future of this club. He's not as good as Busquets. Pedri and Gavi are the future. I think Barcelona would have got away with selling him and justifying the huge fee. I think it would be much more difficult now because he's very popular with his teammates. He's having a really good season. Barcelona are having a really good season as well. The financial issues are not going to melt away. Manchester United would still absolutely like to sign him. I spoke to Erik ten Hag about this in December. His admiration for the player has not gone away at all. And when you see how he's playing this season, you can see why that is. He's been fantastic this season.
Pol, it always felt in the summer like everybody was trying to force this to happen when it was never really likely to happen. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption, especially from the high ranks of the club, because as Andy was saying now, the financial problems were too much for the club, and Frenkie de Jong was seen as a player that he wasn't like a holding midfielder for Barcelona. He wasn't a number 8 or number 10 and an attacking midfielder for Barcelona. So the club and the team was struggling to find like the best position for him. So if you can get good money for a player who is not like playing in a position where he can blossom, I think that the fans would have understood, as Andy was saying, and the board was like pushing in that direction. Plus, before former President Bartomeu, he signed like a salary the farewell that is going to make Frenkie de Jong be a high earner in the coming seasons, which is absolutely fair, but it's something that it was seen as kind of a problem in the club, and probably that's mainly like the reason why Barcelona board wanted to not force a move out, but let him know that the club would be happy to sell him. But at the end of the day, as Andy was saying, Frenkie de Jong wants to live in Barcelona, wants to play for Barcelona. He feels this is his dream club. And this is why we are here right now talking about Frenkie de Jong as a Barcelona player.
Yeah, and but just before I come into why he wants to be at Barcelona, of which there are obviously several reasons, but the other feeling, if you go back to the summer, Carl, was that at the time that United were trying to get de Jong, he was their primary target. Other players hadn't necessarily come in at that stage, and there was a sense, wasn't there, that Manchester United were throwing all their eggs into a basket that, with a player that they couldn't get in a really complicated deal that involved, wage deferrals and all sorts. And I mean, you go back to the summer and think, why the hell are they trying to pull off the most complicated transfer when they haven't had great success in the past, albeit under different people?
The writer Musa Gwonga described Frenkie de Jong signing for Man United as like putting a Rembrandt in a crumbling museum. That was the chaos United were in last summer. But in all, to pursue Frenkie de Jong, I think was sensible, because I think if you're a football club, if you're one of the half a dozen football clubs in the world that can afford Frenkie de Jong's wages, if there is an opportunity to get Frenkie de Jong, you should try and get Frenkie de Jong. He is a utterly unique, sometimes bizarre central midfielder that at times can look like what the future of football will look like. I'm very, very high on his potential. And I think, especially after his final season at Ajax, it really looked as if there was going to be a point in time where football clubs were either going to try and make Frenkie de Jongs in their own academy, or spend a long time in Champions League scouting reports trying to figure out ways to stop Frenkie de Jong. He is remarkable at ball progression via ball carries. So you want to get the ball between the two penalty areas. There are way worse things you can do than just give the ball to Frenkie de Jong, go run. And you shouldn't do that, right? We've spent so long in terms of coordinated pressing and counter pressing and whatnot, that one person dribbling through central midfield shouldn't work anymore. And yet Frenkie de Jong does it time and time and time again. This is why Barcelona wanted him after his time at Ajax. This is why he probably got misdiagnosed at Barcelona. He was, I think, when he arrived at Barcelona, everyone thought he was going to be the successor to Busquets and be the deepest midfielder. And Frenkie isn't that sort of player. Paul can explain that, and Andy can explain it as well. He very much needs the security of someone like a Busquets behind him. So when he does make that run, if he does for some reason lose the ball, someone can mop up. And I think it's only this season really that Barcelona fans have properly figured out what he can do. And I think that's why Ten Hag wanted him, because Manchester United are bad at that thing that Frenkie de Jong is remarkable at.
You'd agree, would you, Andy?
Yeah, I think Frenkie gave a quote last year where he said, "I want to be the player who gets the ball first, either from the goalkeeper or the defenders." So people assume then that he wanted to be Sergio Busquets, but as Carl said, he's a very different type of player to Sergio Busquets. And Barca have changed their tactics this season. They traditionally play a 4-3-3, but Xavi Hernandez is using 4 midfielders. And Paul and I both spoke to Ter Stegen, the goalkeeper, who's also having a great season, on Friday about Frenkie, and he was absolutely glowing. And while he was talking to us, he looked at the chair and said, "If he wants to go again, I'm gonna make that." And he sort of showed a bike lock, and he said, "I'm gonna lock Frenkie de Jong so that he cannot leave here ever."
And just going back to the point that I did with Carl, Andy, on United going for him in the summer, he was, from your point of view, he was worth the potential ridicule that the United recruitment department were going to get. Because let's bear in mind, at the stage that United were going for De Jong, the other signings that have subsequently come in who have been praised, Martinez, Casemiro, the two in particular, they hadn't been signed. So their recruitment at that stage, whilst I won't go as far as saying it had been a laughingstock, had been criticised an awful lot.
And had been criticised with good reason. It's just gone quiet here in the press room because a gentleman has come in and signalled us to go and watch Frenkie de Jong training.
Right. Last answer, and then I'll let you go.
Oh, it's fine. United finished last season terribly. The club had a huge reputation. It had money, but little else. Nobody knew how Erik Ten Hag would do. Frenkie de Jong didn't have a particularly... it worked with Eric at Ajax, so that was a key relationship which Ten Hag thought. But most of all, Barca thought that they needed the money, and United thought that they would sell. And I must admit, I did as well. I never had any hard evidence at no point, and this ran for 3 months, that he wanted to leave the club. There were weeks when I thought it's more probable than possible. And I thought, why are the club spending so much time here? But in the background, United started to talk to Casemiro. Christian Eriksen was also bubbling along as well. But De Jong was the number one target. But at no point did I get any indication, and I was speaking to senior people at FC Barcelona, that Frenkie de Jong wanted to leave the club.